So welcome to our podcast. Betsy, you know my name, Ardina Seward. I am Ardina, and my partner here in crime, Robert Pargament, who also worked in news, and Ken Rosato, who I work with. This is our show called 3Grownups. Uh, Tonight, we are going to talk about your new coalition called Save Our Cities. Now, Betsy, Ken, Bob, if you remember, back in the day, we were all at Eyewitness News. There was an organization called Association for a Better New York.
Mm-hmm.
And the point was to make New York better than it was at that time. And Betsy, it sounds like you are doing the same with a group of distinguished New Yorkers to make New York better, God willing, much better than it is now. So tell us
Well,
about.
that's right. If you talk to New Yorkers from any of the boroughs, people involved in any workplace activities, what kind of job they have, whether they work at McDonald's or at Chase Manhattan Bank, they will tell you the same thing. New York is in serious decline. You can see it on the streets where chaos has replaced order and civility. You can see it when you walk into a drugstore and everything's locked up. I'm brushing my teeth with children's bubblegum flavored toothpaste because everything else is locked up and I don't have time to wait for the clerks. You can certainly see it in the fear on people's faces as they wait on the subway platforms, literally clinging to the walls because they're so afraid of crime in the subway. And you can see it even when people are trying to cross the street because now there's a tremendous amount of street crime. You can see it in neighborhoods in the outer boroughs, particularly in Queens, which has been overwhelmed by migrant shelters. And the spillover from the shelters is a lot of crime, tremendous stress in our public schools. So a group of us have gotten together. Ray Kelly, the longest serving police commissioner, and I formed this group really just as the basis. There are going to be tens of thousands of people in this group. That is our intention. And we are going to give voice to the unheard New Yorkers who are very concerned that the public officials, never mind what party they belong to, are not listening to their practical concerns. For most of the polls, it's all about ideology. But for us, it's about a safe subway ride, good schools, and order instead of chaos in our neighborhoods and on our streets. Those are our goals. We're particularly concerned also with the rise of anti-Semitism in New York. This is the largest Jewish population in the world, larger than Jerusalem and Tel Aviv combined. We have a real obligation to ensure that Jewish New Yorkers feel safe. And of course, we have to bring back the businesses and residents who have fled in the last 4 years to have a tax base and to have a thriving community.
Okay, Ken, Bob, I know you want to weigh in here.
If I may jump in, I think part of the issue is New York started with the concept of a sanctuary city for one specific purpose decades ago. And that was because police on the beat were afraid that if every time they approached somebody who was not here legally and asked them if they had witnessed a crime, etc., those people were reticent to speak to the police because they were worried the police would then turn them in and these people would be deported. That was the original intent of the sanctuary city. Unfortunately, ideologues have taken that intent and they bastardized it. They've taken it to the point where they are literally in violation of the Constitution. A lot of people forget when a local lawmaker, as Betsy, when you were lieutenant governor, you know, when you're a state lawmaker or a local lawmaker, you don't only take an oath to uphold the Constitution of the local municipality, but of the United States of America.
Absolutely.
And these people have taken an oath. The mayor of the city of New York and all the sanctuary cities around the country, they took an oath to uphold the United States Constitution. They're supposed to abide by and cooperate with federal law enforcement, but they don't. Here's a question. When a bank gets robbed, local police take part, right? But a bank is technically under FBI territory because that's federal, that's money. But yet the local police don't say, oh, it's a sanctuary bank, we're not going to stop the robbers. Oh, they go in and they enforce, even though it's federal law, they go in and enforce the law. So why are we picking and choosing which federal laws we're going to enforce?
You know, you've raised such an important issue there. But let me say this. We wouldn't even have to give up the whole concept of sanctuary city because there was a nugget of common sense originally. But we must allow the police to notify federal immigration officials when they're dealing with violent criminals. Let me point out that 75% of the arrests in Midtown Manhattan, 75% are migrants. 75%. And a significant number now are from this gang, Tren de Aragua, from Venezuela. These are real killers with knives, and they're just bloodthirsty, awful killers, and they're invading many cities. But here in New York, they've set up shop inside the shelters. So they are recruiting kids who are in the shelters. Believe it or not, there are migrant children attending public school during the day and then being armed with pistols and driven to shopping centers out on Long Island to rob them at night, to rob the customers and to steal the merchandise, a Macy's, for example, out there. So it's very important that the immigration officials be able to stem this. And of course, it would also be a great relief for taxpayers, because why should New York taxpayers pay to have some migrant imprisoned in New York State for 40 years when we could deport him instead? We don't have that much money to throw around, and we are neglecting our school children, our own homeless, and many other issues, public safety included.
Bob, we haven't heard from you.
Yeah, I was going to ask Betsy, so what is the end game here? How does Save Our Cities affect these changes? Is it to run a candidate? Is it Ray Kelly, yourself? What's the end game here?
Well, here's why I started it with Ray, of course. Here's why I started it. I was looking at the numbers last November. The number of people who turned out to vote in the city council election, this was a very special election. All 51 seats were up for grabs, unusual because of redistricting. So here is the New York City legislature being elected in total, right? 7.8% of the electorate turned out for the primary, 12.8% for the general election. Think about it. The number of people who turned out in that general election was barely the same as the number of people who fled New York, voted with their feet to leave New York over the last 3 years. I thought, we have to do something about that. So Save Our City is a 501c3. Our goal is to build awareness among the public. Our theme is, it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. If we invite the public's participation, if we really get people involved, and we're going to start having forums and meetings and form committees, we can go to the public officials and say, it's not just a few of us talking. We've got 40,000 people here who want you to go to court and challenge the legal mandate that requires that we provide shelter, 3 meals a day, laundry service, healthcare, and legal representation to anybody who walks into our city from anywhere in the world. Who could afford that, right? But that's the mandate under which the city is currently operating. Unfortunately, our current mayor and city council have not gone to court. They could, but they haven't. And that should be done, because that mandate alone, which originated in 1981 and has been reinterpreted many times, that mandate alone sets New York apart from all the other cities. That's why over 200,000 migrants have come to New York, far exceeding any place else, because everybody knows this city will provide you with a roof, 3 meals a day, and lots of extras.
the current mayor would feel comfortable doing something like taking anyone to court, the federal government specifically, when the federal government sicks the Justice Department on them?
Not the federal government. Let me explain who it is. There's something in New York I call the Migrant Advocacy Industrial Complex. This consists of companies that make a lot of money operating shelters. The former speaker, Christine Quinn, is part of one of those companies. It consists of the companies that provide the meals delivered to the migrants. And let me point out that Delta and American Airlines and United, all the airlines out of LaGuardia and Kennedy, they pay $4 per meal delivered to the gate. The city pays 11. No. The city taxpayers are getting ripped off, right? So in addition, we have the Coalition of the Homeless, the New York Civil Liberties Union, all of these groups that go to court and sue on behalf of what they claim are the homeless, including the migrants. They sue New York City. They are funded by New York City. Look at their budgets. The taxpayers are funding them every year to turn around and sue us, right? This has got to stop. So I would say we should always take care of our homeless. That's part of who we are as New Yorkers, but we cannot shelter the entire world. We must take care of our own.
Okay, a lot depends, I should say, I'm assuming a lot depends on the outcome of the presidential election. Because, we have to remember that the feds have the ability to either keep a lot of funds or give a lot of funds to New York City. Adams asked for additional funds, and this particular administration didn't give him additional funds for this homeless problem. So depending on the outcome of the presidential election, how will your group navigate the political atmosphere?
Well, our purpose, as I said, is to ignite tremendous participation among New Yorkers. We're not representing a political party. We really are nonpartisan because, let me point out, regardless of whom I'm supporting in this election, you cannot win enough support in New York to really change things if you're only dealing with Republicans. You can't. It's 8-1, right? So we're opening our arms and saying, this is a common sense coalition. We're bringing in people who want safe streets and good schools and the ability to operate a business, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, or you even register with some other party. So how will we deal with the winners? I think that the incoming administration, first of all, the Democrats have not been good to New York. They have not been good, as you pointed out, right? Donald Trump is a New Yorker, so I can suggest that maybe he will be better to New York. He certainly in the past has been good to New York. We'll have to see. Don't take my prediction. This is a local effort and a bipartisan effort. And I really hope that when people listen to your wonderful podcast, they will come to saveourcityny.org. That's our website, saveourcityny.org. Sign up. And you know what we ask for? We don't ask for your money, although that would be great. We don't even ask for your name at the beginning. We ask for your ideas and opinions because we're there to give voice to you.
There are a lot of disgruntled people out there.
Oh, yes.
From both sides. And although your coalition is new, it needs to be pointed out that it's a bipartisan coalition.
Yes.
It's a combination of Republicans and Democrats and independents.
That's right.
Where has your biggest response come from to date?
Well, we don't ask people when they signed up if they belong to a political party. We don't ask.
So
We ask them where they live,
Right.
but most importantly, we ask them what they want us to do.
That's what I'm asking.
That's right. We're asking them, and I can tell you so far, so we've only been up a week. But of course, so far, public safety is major. The migrant shelters, major. We can do things about this. We can do things about this. For example, let me give you an example. as I said, I started out by looking at the New York City Council races. Rearranging the chairs in the mayor's office by itself is not enough to turn this city around, right? It is not. And the problems preceded whatever legal woes Mayor Eric Adams is facing. We have a city council that has been hijacked by what I try to respectfully call the lunatic left. Never mind partisanship. Look at their priorities. Look at their priorities. Over the last year, they have passed a resolution, a law, they call it a local law, saying that in New York City, there is a right, a human right to live on the street. Now, the Supreme Court has said just the opposite. We don't want people living on the street. We are trying to create order on the streets. We want people to have to go to a shelter or receive other types of assistance. But sleeping on the street is not going to improve life for these people who are sleeping on the street. Nobody has a human right to freeze to death. And it certainly is not going to improve life for the neighborhoods around those people who are sleeping on the street. Secondly, so they said they established a right to sleep on the street, and they imposed on the New York City Police Department a ream of new paperwork regulations, requirements, every time a cop stops to talk to anybody on the street for any reason. So that's going to slow down, impede communication between our police officers and the very people they're serving on the street, right? That kind of paperwork requirement is preposterous. Now, what are they looking for? You've read it. You've read it in the paper in the last week. They want to muzzle police departments, so members of the police department can't criticize the city council. Yes, they want to impose a muzzle on the New York NYPD that they cannot post criticisms of the city council's legislation on TikTok or Twitter or the other social medias. Clearly a violation of the First Amendment. Secondly, while they want to limit expression by the police, they want to expand expression by Rikers Island inmates. They are voting to provide Rikers Island inmates with all kinds of sexual prosthetics and toys, prosthetic penises, silicone breasts. I don't mean to be titillating here, but this is ridiculous. That's on their agenda, right? Number three, this week they proposed expanding the requirement that employers provide paid sick leave to include sick leave for your pets. Well, it's hard enough to run a business in New York. This is over the top. So we need to focus not only on what the mayor's doing, but we need to ensure that whoever is the next mayor has a city council that doesn't treat the mayor like a piñata. Right now, this city council treats the mayor like a piñata. The mayor tried to stop that proposal for all the extra paperwork. The city council easily overrode that mayor's objections. They actually want to increase their powers and even limit how the mayor can make appointments to head the fire department and the police department, for example. They would force the mayor, if they could, to put an anti-cop person in as police commissioner, right? So we really have to pay attention to the city council elections. Most people have no clue who their city council representative is. The turnout is so low, we have to build interest in those elections.
Betsy,
I'm sorry if I may, also being that you served in Albany, how it's pretty much mirrored by who we have elected as assembly people and state senators. It used to be kind of a checks and balances where you had maybe one house Republican, one house Democrat, and they kind of went back and forth.
Back in my day, that's what it was.
But now it's not even a little on one side. It's almost like the city council. It's overwhelmingly one side. And I think no matter which side is in that kind of control, Republican or Democrat, when you have 90% control or 85% control, there's no checks and balances. You could run amok. Normally, when people run for office, they run on their side, maybe a little, the Democrats might be a little more liberal for their constituents, and then they run against the opposing side and they sound more neutral. Now, when you only have one party rule, you could be as far to one side as you want. It doesn't matter. As long as you have a D next to your name in New York City or state, you'll get elected. So all you have to do is kiss the butt of the party boss. You're in. So when that kind of nonsense happens, you have people who, as you mentioned, tying up the police and not letting them do their jobs. And then the constituents don't say a word because they would rather have somebody who may be a little nuts, but at least they have a D next to their name, so it's okay.
Right.
Really? Is that the city you want to live in? So I think we have to get wiser. How about this? If the city council wants to be that stupid, and they really are, just plain old stupid, then why doesn't somebody come up with an app for the police using AI so that all that paperwork can be done by AI? Police have their recording on, everything the cop says gets recorded. Their 200-page report gets filled out by AI. Here's your 200-page report, city council member. You take a read now. I'll go on to the next guy. It can be done. McDonald's owners when they were told $25 an hour was minimum wage, they decided to put up kiosks. You're telling me I have to pay 20 people $25 an hour? Bye-bye. You're all gone. Now we have a computer. So I think we should do the same thing with the cops. Let them all file their paperwork with AI and shut the city council up.
Well, that's an interesting idea. You're so right about the perils of one-party government. One-party government is just a bad idea. Ever since the era of Andrew Jackson, we've had two parties in this country, and it's that two-party system that creates better ideas and balance, reasonableness. But unfortunately, in New York, I hate to say it, but the Republican Party is kind of MIA.
Bob.
Yes, I was going to ask Betsy. So, and Ken, so this is obviously a national problem. We see it right outside of our doors here. Of course, we probably get the vast majority of these issues. Are there other cities that have handled this better? Have you any examples that come to mind of?
Well, I see rebellion going on, and I hate to point to California because who would ever imitate California? But we don't want to Californicate the rest of the country. But the fact is, there is a real rebellion going on, not only in Los Angeles, not only in San Francisco, but also in Los Angeles. I'm sure that you have probably heard about the rebellion against the re-election of this very extreme left district attorney in Los Angeles. People want more law and order. That's really what's behind this resentencing of the Menendez brothers. Gaston was losing by so much. He had to come up with some vehicle to attract a lot of public attention to himself, and the Menendez brothers are the beneficiaries.
That Netflix special didn't hurt, I'm sure. Also,
Right.
So sociologically, I know this might be a very big question that might be better left to sociologists. But what is behind all of this? What is going on on the extra national level that's driving all these people here? Are these?
Well, that's a really important question. You're such a smart guy. This is a worldwide movement of people from the Southern Hemisphere. Take the globe and look at the bottom half of it. In general, there are a few exceptions, but in general, it's a movement of people from the Southern Hemisphere to the Northern Hemisphere. They see that people in the Northern Hemisphere have more wealth, and they're moving up to take it. And I mean that, to take it. And so in most Western European countries, they're grappling with the same thing the United States is grappling with. Will we let people just in to take it? Will we stem the flow and pace it? Will we respond by helping people in those countries? But it's a big issue, whether it's Italy or Germany or Poland or England. They're facing the same issue that we're facing in the United States. The one exception is they don't have truly open borders the way we do. Ours is more extreme at this point.
If I may jump in, Poland has actually. Go ahead, Bob. Go ahead.
I'm just going to admit one more person, the third part of the triumvirate, Vic Sternberg, who's also a member of this group. So if I may, just let me bring him on in. I'm sure I'll have some good questions as well. And here he comes. Mary is his wife's name. That's why her name is appearing on the screen. We never call Vic Mary. We call Vic. And there he is, Vic.
Hi, guys.
Hi,
Hello.
joining us a few minutes into it, but so we're in the middle of a conversation, Vic. You'll follow along as we continue. So go ahead, Betsy. I'm so sorry.
So I was laying out why we founded Save Our City. It's been launched for about a week already. My phone keeps ding, ding, dinging as people sign up. People really want a voice. They feel as if the politicians aren't listening to their very practical concerns. As I said at the beginning, they're sick of the ideology, right? They want safe subway rides, good schools, order instead of chaos on the street. They realize that we have to bring back the 160 financial institutions, the 600,000 people who have abandoned the New York, literally just left in the last 3.5 years. And we have to address some of the quality of life concerns and real public safety issues behind that mass exodus.
Ken mentioned AI before. Now, this may sound kind of tangential, but what happens if we have a glut of undocumented persons here filling low-skilled jobs, and AI, which is going to take over a lot of the low-skilled job functions? Now, we're going to be left with a lot of people that either need to be retrained or can't be retrained and going to kind of fall through the bottom. So has there been any?
Oh, I see Ken nodding his head, so I think he'd like to say something about it. Let me just say that it's a much longer term issue. Save Our City is in for the short term to fix things now. Go ahead.
Oh, did you want me to jump in? I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Ardina is saying, and Betsy, you're right on it. I mean, I think that this is presenting a potential future absolute catastrophe if we don't address this very seriously right now. And, 2 years ago and 4 years ago, everybody was saying, oh, you're a bunch of xenophobe racists if you're against all these people coming in. No, we love the idea of immigrants coming here.
Yes.
I'm in a situation where my family came through Argentina for 17, they waited 17 years to legally migrate into the United States. But by doing that, they came in, they weren't on welfare. They came in, my grandfather, even though he had a second grade education, he had a skill. In Argentina, he learned construction, came here, had a business, etc. He died a millionaire. Died a millionaire with $8 in his pocket when he arrived. Nobody helping him here. The point, I'm not trying to, pat ourselves on the back. The point I'm trying to make is there's a reason why we have a migration system the way it is. And I'm a talk show host on radio as well. And one of the things people keep saying, the mantra is, our immigration system is broken. We have to fix it. There are 75 immigration laws on the books that have worked pretty damn well for 200 years. It's not a matter of we have to fix it. We have to enforce it. And nobody is willing to enforce it right now. And I think that's part of the problem. 3.5 million people legally migrate into the United States every year. That's great. That's more than every other country on the planet combined in terms of who's allowed in. So, go ahead, Betsy.
Let me point out that the illegal migration that's flooding cities like New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston, and many suburbs and rural towns in Maine, for example, that are very poor, is having an impact on the public school system. Because when you take 2 or 3 migrant kids who may have never been to school before, they certainly don't speak the language, and you put them in an 8th grade class, the teacher has to focus all of his or her attention on those children. It's almost a lost year for everybody else in the class. Long term, we can already see the impact of this. If you look at the math and reading scores for the United States over the last 2 decades, you will see them constantly going down, just as the increase in non-US born children in those classrooms goes way up. Now, I want to just point out one thing. It's not because they're foreigners. No, it's because we have adopted a method of learning called bilingual education. So in a classroom, you have a teacher who has to present the lesson in English, and then the same lesson in 2 or 3 other languages. He or she may have an assistant there, but for the kids in the class, instead of having an hour of teaching in one language, they hear this babble, 20 minutes in English, 20 minutes in Spanish, 20 minutes in Russian. And so the kids are learning less because they're really getting less instruction in a language. I see you nodding your head, but there have been several studies in Europe about this, where they measured learning when all the kids in the class speak the same language. In Spain, for example, they studied this, versus migrants from non-Spanish speaking countries coming in, where the score started to go way down.
Well, let me interject because I'm a bit of an expert in this subject, and I think you're being very myopic. The scores on tests have gone down for the last 45 years in every state in the United States. I looked at the statistics from 1959 to 2019. In 50 states, they measured spending per pupil and outcomes. Spending per pupil almost doubled, and the outcomes in every state without migrants went down. So in New York City, the schools failed a long time ago. I went to New York City schools, nothing to do with bilingual education. The standard of education in this country has decreased. You're looking at one particular slice. It's 45 years.
Yes, I agree that it's been going down for a long time.
United States.
But if you compare Mississippi, for example, with New York, Mississippi has very low spending, very low.
It's not related to spending.
And yet they have not experienced the decline.
Don't pick the immigrants, because the immigrants are a problem, but educational standards, period. You know,
I will agree with you. I'm just pointing out this is an extra burden on teachers and students, and it's having a deleterious impact. I agree with you that standards are going down, and there are many other reasons. But in addition, this is a serious problem.
No question about it. But if you don't deal with the educational civics education of the United States,
I agree.
Through every state, you know, we like to focus on the flavor of the day because it has political power. As somebody who speaks to college professors and who speaks to educators, in New York State, when they used to have the Regents exam when I went to school, there was no curve.
Right.
A number of years ago, they put a curve on it. The passing score in geometry a decade ago was 38% to get through geometry. When I went there, it was 65. This is a dumbing down of America. Everything you see has gone wrong with our country.
Totally agree with you. Terrible.
Out of our educational system. And we're focused on immigration, but in Iowa and Minnesota and Maine and North Dakota, it's universal without immigrants. So rather than immigration, all the cities in this country are struggling.
That's right. This is an added burden, but I agree that yes, we have allowed standards to decline, and I would suggest, although this may be a very controversial statement, controversial but true, the teachers union has been an aider and abetter of this decline in standards. Not the teachers, but the teachers unions.
How so, Betsy? How so?
Well, because you see it in New York. Instead of dealing with the declining standards, they constantly push for changes to mask the decline in standards. A perfect example, truancy. Truancy is up to 30% in New York City schools now. Can you imagine? 30% of the kids routinely don't show up. So the union suggested that we stop measuring truancy. That's not the way to solve the problem.
Yeah, in addition, they're very anti-charter school for obvious reasons, but still, the charter school is kind of a niche industry to educate kids. It has the smallest student-teacher ratio, but that's something that the teachers union could get involved in, organizing the teachers in the charter school system, but they've been vehemently opposed to that so far.
May I ask a question, Betsy, also? You know, I mean, so the flip side of this, or part of this overall picture, is the need for inexpensive labor, right? An economy that's not bringing in its share of immigration is going to shrink ultimately. I believe China's having this issue with a shrinking population and so on. Is there some role for American business to ameliorate these issues, or at least to contribute through educational programs to corporations who are ultimately going to need these people to work in their offices? Any thoughts about that?
Yes, I think there are very important ways to do that, including apprenticeships, which used to be a method of education many decades ago. We know there are a lot of kids going to a four-year college and studying sociology or some other field, pick any field, who really would have a much better start in life if they had an apprentice program after high school in a business where they learned a trade and learned skills and could really start supporting themselves and even a family. I think we should definitely do that.
Great.
Yes.
30 years ago, I had a gentleman who was the head of Health and Human Resources at a large corporation. And he'd been in the field for many, many years. He started in the 50s, and now we're in the mid 80s. And he said to me, this is before this immigration issue. He said to me, when I started my career interviewing young people, I could hire 50 out of 100 people from colleges and around America. He says, at the end of my career, I could hire about 5. Because they'd come in, they'd ask me, what are my benefits? What are my hours? What are my salary? What are my days off? So this is just if you want to see the people who work the hardest in this country, they're immigrants, the hardest working people.
Yes.
Go to Chinatown, go to some of the
I agree.
where they come in, where they didn't start an entitlement mentality. A lot of American people in this country that grew up well, that didn't grow up poorly with poor homes, had a tremendous work ethic. We have taken our children and given them an entitlement mentality, not just in city, right here in Westchester County. We have kids in school here that if you don't give them a B or an A, their parents are on your back. At NYU, they recently asked the professor of organic chemistry to step down because the students were paying $80,000 and they weren't getting B's and A's to go to medical school. They asked them to step down from the program. These are bright kids that are kind of
Terrible.
you. It's an endemic problem in the American mentality.
Yes.
And I know you're politically connected. The kind of conversations we're having at the highest levels of this country are inane. Go back and look at the debate between John Kennedy and Richard Nixon in 1960. Watch them stand up and give, when Richard Nixon said, Mr. Kennedy and I have the same goals for America. We just have different means of meeting them. Two gentlemen having a conversation. Yeah. You put it on now and listen to what goes on. You can see the downing of America in the very hot type of our country. So let's not point to the group. We've met the enemy. It is us.
That's right. Well, I hope that you all, I'm looking at the time and I've got another engagement, but let me say, I hope you will all take an interest in Save Our City. We welcome all your ideas and the ideas of all the wonderful people who are going to listen to your podcast. SaveOurCityNY.org. Sign up, give yourself a voice, get your neighbors involved. We can take our city back with practical goals, really nonpartisan practical goals like a safe subway ride, good schools, very important, and order instead of chaos on the streets. And we can do it together. We will be the voice, we will be heard, and you will be in charge.
Thank you, Betsy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Betsy.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity tonight. So nice to reconnect, right?
Yes,
and
indeed.
Enjoy a conversation.
Yes,
bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
And then there were 4.
And then there were 4. No, there was
Ken, you've been quiet for the past few minutes. What are your thoughts?
Because I was very vociferous in the beginning, and I just want to let I want to hear from our newest guest, and a lot of wonderful insight. My mother was a teacher as well, and she worked in Westchester County. So I was fascinated to hear what and forgive me, I forgot your name. It says Mary, and I know you're not Mary. That's your wife. What was your name? Sorry, I'm sorry.
Victor Sternberg.
Dr. Vic Sternberg is a periodontist in Westchester County and a true intellectual. So go ahead.
Now I know where to go, but it's a pleasure, Victor. Definitely a pleasure. I think my question here now is, where is the direction going here? Are we I don't think there's much of an argument about the contribution of immigrants. This country was built on immigration. Everybody except for Native Americans were immigrants. This country, everything, its roots, its foundation is immigration. My question is, are we differentiating between doing so legally and in certain numbers versus en masse with uncontrolled numbers and not necessarily following legal means? And what the impact of the en masse migration into our country has, in terms of finances, in terms of taxes, in terms of, you may say that it may not be the cause, and I may totally concur with you on that, Victor, that it may not be what's causing a decline in literacy skills, but it is certainly causing, we have to pay for them to eat, we're paying to house, et cetera. All I'm saying is, where are we going with the argument or the debate right now? Are we headed, is this a legal migration versus illegal migration? Or is this a contribution of immigrants versus native-born Americans? Where are we headed with the discussion?
Bob, a number of years ago, John McCain and a number of bipartisan Republicans and Democrats came up with an immigration bill that would have taken the people here and given them a path to getting a visa that had come out of the shadows, and they would have dealt with the border. And there was such a blowback by people at home who were so angry that we give people here a pathway to get visas and maybe eventually citizenship. The bill got canned. The problem is not the good ideas. The problem is the politics of getting elected prevent either party from taking a position which is going to lose them votes. You know, it's the downside of democracy that prevents action taking place. And so I don't think there's a good solution to this problem, not because it's not solvable, because we don't have politicians that have the guts to say, this is what I believe, and if you like it, vote for me, and if you don't like it, don't vote for me. We keep worrying about what's the poll numbers instead of doing the right thing. And that's why I'm worried about us ever solving this problem.
Well, you know, it's almost as though I hear what you're saying, Vic, but it's almost as though the wheels have already been set in motion, and there's going to be a struggle to be able to stabilize what's happening. The case in point is that the New York City Council sponsored a bill, I believe it was last year, to give non-citizens the right to vote in local elections. That means that the voting rolls would have swelled to roughly 900,000 extra votes of non-citizens. A Republican group, and the bill passed. The bill was on the books. The bill is now being challenged by a Republican group saying, you cannot have this. So the fact that the bill was able to pass is concerning. The Republicans may win because they've been able to basically a stop work order, if you will, on the bill. But the city council has vowed to fight that, and it just may become law. So that means that somebody can be in the country for 10 days. And if they fall within the election cycle, then they have the right to vote. So what do we do about that? How do we stop that?
Constitution we have to have the Supreme Court make a rule that becomes a rule for all what's required to be able to vote in a local election. And citizenship should be non-negotiable. There should not be a case where we have to have one rule in New York and one rule somewhere else, or New York City, where a group of politicians, because they want to get elected, are going to make people vote who have no right to vote. This should be a standard policy that's across the board in our country. And it should be brought to the Supreme Court to vote on whether a person who's not a citizen can vote in an election. That should not be complicated, but it's become complicated.
But keep in mind that then I don't have unfortunately, I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but there are, I believe, 4 states in the United States that allow non-citizens to vote in their elections, not in the federal elections, but in the local elections. So it means that that rule is already in effect in this country. So does that mean that that's going to expand? You know, where do we go from here?
If I could jump in here, part of the problem is, and I've heard this argument from the people opposing non-citizens voting in local elections, part of it stems from, if you're a United States citizen and you are required to pay taxes and participate in all the legality, and you're a non-citizens now, in some cases, if you're here, you could be a legal resident. I mean, so that's different. But if you are a non-citizen and you're not in the United States in any way legal, but you're permitted to vote, you, in essence, depriving a tax-paying legal resident of the United States of their constitutional rights, because you can function to counter their vote. And so why bother being a citizen? What's the value in my being a citizen of the United States if we're both protected by the same military, only I'm required to go to school, to get my education, to pay taxes, to follow all the laws, but you hide in the shadows and you could still vote and literally contradict my vote. Then what's the point of being a citizen? Victor, I can't agree with you more that this really does have to become and if the Supreme Court says everyone could vote, then everyone can vote. But I think you're right. It has to be universal.
This is the argument about Prop 1, which we have the option of voting for or voting against now. And a lot of moderates are saying don't vote for Prop 1 because there's a backdoor clause in there which would allow non-citizens to vote. And this is coming up in the next, we're talking about 10 days from now, 9 days from now. So, again, I'd like to hear, I'd like to weigh in on that. Because it supposedly, this bill, Prop 1, is a bill which supports abortion rights, but it also is a magnified equal rights amendment, which could possibly say that you can vote if you are a non-citizen, because if you're denied the right to vote, that is discrimination. So again, I throw it out there. So Vic, you have your hand raised.
Telling me that is in a bill. If that bill passes, then non-citizens can then have the right to vote. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, this is in. I mean, Prop 1 is being argued on both sides because I think the strict interpreters of the Constitution is saying that's a lot of bull. If you're pardon my expression, that does not guarantee non-citizens the right to vote. It is simply an expanded equal rights amendment. So the other constitutional interpreters are saying that is incorrect by law because it says equal rights for a larger group of people, and equal rights can be interpreted to mean that non-citizens have equal rights to vote as well as citizens. And I'm probably not characterizing it in the best of legal terms, but this is the argument. So that's what I'm asking.
Seems this is like a balloon that gets blown, one of the stretch balloons that has issues on either end. It's expanding on either end, and either end can pop. I mean, you have the driving forces that are sending people over here. I'm not sure it's as simple as people just want to take your stuff. I don't necessarily agree with it. I think there's desperation, as there always has been, behind these waves of immigration. And I was reading recently, and I'd have to re-research it, but I think there's been some reduction in immigration from Mexico, and I believe some of that is corporate development in Mexico. That there's been more U.S. corporations stepping up to give people employment there. I think there's also the issue of climate change, which is probably affecting people agriculturally and sending some of these these laborers in desperation to find work in American agriculture. And then we have, on this end, we have all of these issues. We have some history of xenophobia too. Let's be honest about it, right? I mean, you go back to the old days of old New York. I'm reading Island at the Center of the World, great book, Russell Shirley. You know this book, Ken? Just the conflicts that were showing up as you would expect with all the different groups that were making their way into New York. I guess at the end of the day, Supreme Court changes are the fix it on this end. But I think we also have to look at, what's causing this tremendous surge. And not that I have any of the answers, but the corporate side seems to me, whether it's American corporations taking advantage of the labor forces down there and the relatively low costs versus here, and employment over here, that might be one plausible solution to ameliorate this somewhat. I don't know. Maybe that's naive, but
and I interject. Look, almost all, with some exceptions, of Latin America is corrupt. The governments are corrupted by
yes.
And so the prosperity of Latin America, whether it be Venezuela or Central America, is really going to be impeded unless they do what they did in El Salvador. They locked up 78,000 people and put them in prison. They took all of the criminals, all the drug dealers, and the crime rate dropped precipitously, and people are not getting killed on the street. I don't think many countries have the guts to do that. Most leaders would be shot if they did that. But it's a little Pollyanna to understand that Latin America, they're coming from Latin America because they can. There's a lot of people in Southeast Asia and Africa that can't come here so easily. Africa is not exactly economically booming. A little more of a trip to come across the ocean than it is to come across the border. So the fact that there's economically deprived people, I understand that. And it's not xenophobic to say, listen, you know what? We want to let people equally come in. We used to have quotas. You come from different parts of the world, way before 1924 when they closed the doors. But we closed the doors. There's xenophobia. But there should be some way of us deciding that we're going to have so many immigrants from different parts of the world as we have had. But it shouldn't be chosen by geographic proximity. It should be chosen by the American government and the people. How many people come here and from where? That's
Oh,
my
yeah,
If I could,
program.
go ahead.
The program in California, which worked. I mean, that was a program where people coming in from Mexico would be given permits, seasonal permits to work. The unfortunate part of the Bracero program is that the living conditions were not good. People were able to make a wage and then return back home. If that program could be reinvigorated, that would help also. I don't know what caused the demise of that program, but sure, there are seasonal jobs that are needed. Crops have to be harvested. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. So why not have a permit process? And I'd like to make another note also when you're talking about manufacturing in not manufacturing, but the cooperation of the Mexican government. Don't forget that the Mexican government profits with migrants coming to the United States. Why? Because the migrants make money in the United States, and then that money is sent back to Mexico. There's a town, Ken is probably familiar with it, called Puebla in Mexico, where the bulk of Mexican migrants were coming from and are still coming from. Puebla used to be a hole in the wall. Now it's got magnificent houses and infrastructure and schools. Why? Because that was funded by the migrants that came in to the United States. So that basically it exempts the Mexican government, if you will, from having to put money into Puebla, because the United States is the bank.
I was raised in New Rochelle, and you know New Rochelle, Ardina, very well, obviously. I was raised in New Rochelle, and when I was a kid, there were all these little country clubs, these beach clubs along the water, and seasonally you would have station wagons full of Mexican migrants who would come up, and they would come up in March and stay until September, October, and they literally would open these clubs up, work. They were the most magnificent, incredible, hardest workers. God bless every one of them. They would get these clubs up and running. They would run them during the summer, and they would close them down and take the money they had. And exactly what Ardina said, many of them, and I know only because I know one of the families, were from Puebla. That's where they were from. And now if you go to New Rochelle, they have moved to New Rochelle. Downtown New Rochelle, every other business is owned and run by now the next generation. And it's the American dream. It's beautiful to see that they made it, they've become citizens, etc. One of the things, though, I just wanted to harken back to, if I may, talking about the number of people, and we talked about the bill that would have legalized a number of people who were here at that point, not legally. And I remember, if you recall, in the 80s, Reagan allowed what was supposed to be a one-time 2 million, mostly Mexicans who were in the United States illegally. And remember this, it passed both houses. And the deal was we would allow 2 million of the migrants here illegally to become citizens. But that was one and done. That the promise was from both sides, it would never happen again. And we were supposed to then beef up the border. And of course, it didn't happen. And now we're talking about allowing more, maybe having another path to citizenship. 3.5 million people are allowed in legally every year. The question is, how many do we, at what point do we have so many that they can't assimilate, that there aren't enough jobs to give them at that moment, and that there isn't enough housing? You have, and I started one little point and then I stop. There's a town right outside of Cincinnati, Ohio. It's called Lockland. Lockland is a town of 3,500 people. There was a group of migrants from Mauritania that was flown directly in, which is why if you look at the statistics right now, the number of border crossings appears down. It's not down. It's just that we're flying people directly in. But the number of people coming into the United States, legal or otherwise, is still huge. But these people, there are 3,000 Mauritanian migrants were plopped. They were literally landed in Cincinnati and they were moved into housing in Lockland, Ohio. You could look this up. And what ends up happening is they are now living, on average, 12 to an apartment meant for 2 to 4 people. New York Post had a story on this. Daily News had an online story about it. What's happening is, I'm sorry to get a little graphic here, but the plumbing system was never intended on having 12 people per apartment. So now people who've been living there, who pay their rent, they have human waste backing up in their bathtubs. This is not the way it's supposed to happen. And I'm sure the people from Mauritania don't like it either. I mean, they probably say, let's get back to Mauritania. Why are we doing this? Why are we living under these circumstances? So I think that's why we have to have an intelligent form of migration. We do have 75 laws on the books on the federal government now. The question is, why aren't they being enforced? That's my only question. Thank you so much for letting me rant.
No, but that's the question. Why? Why aren't they being enforced? I mean, does anybody have any ideas? Is there some nefarious, is there a reason? Vic, you have your hand up.
Why do you think they're not being enforced? Because the political will is not there. Because the people in power don't want to deal with the blowback politically by being seen as draconian, that they're enforcing the law. Just like these people jumping over the turnstiles to get into the train station. It's gotten absolutely out of hand because we don't enforce the law. Because if you enforce the law, you have to incarcerate a group of people. And if you incarcerate a group of people that happen to be from one race as opposed to another race, you're a racist. And then all of the ramifications of the political system begin to go. Because enforcing the law or having standards in school means there's going to be winners and losers. There's going to be people that are criminals and people who are not. And our political class, the sad part of it is, we are not citizens of a country. We are members of a party, and the party wants to stay in power. And when that happens, we're now bearing the fruits of that. And that's why the laws are not enforced. In my opinion, that's why they're not enforced.
But does it kind of boggle your mind that we are seeing the blowback from these policies every day? And what will it take for people to wake up and say, you know something, we are a democracy, but we've got to start reinforcing our laws. I mean, a case in point, and you guys are probably tired of hearing it. It's become my mantra. Hamtramck, Michigan, which was a Polish-American enclave. It's just a few miles outside of Detroit. It's small. I think it's roughly 3-4 square miles. The Polish immigrants did well, moved out, and then slowly, you had Muslim immigrants that started moving in. Now, the entire city council of Hamtramck, Michigan, which was assisted to be voted in by LGBTQ people and progressives, is now all Muslims. All Muslims. The LGBTQ community in Hamtramck wanted to raise the flag on the state building, as it's done across in a lot of cities in the United States. The city council said no. Why did the city council say no? Because there was a strong homophobic content in that particular culture. And then the progressives and the LGBTQ people said, wait a second, we helped to get you guys elected. We believed in you. Now we have become the marginalized people. And the city council said, well, that's just how it is. That's just how it is.
No, let me interject. Same thing happens in Rockland County. There is an Orthodox Jewish community,
right,
runs a school district. They have all members of the school board, because all the people vote, are Orthodox Jews. Okay, none of their children go to the schools. They go to Jewish schools, but they control the budget of the public school. And they're cutting the budget. So the kids who live there are not getting any money spent in education. Now, mind you, these people were elected by the community because everybody in the community voted for these people. The rest of the population did not vote in the same numbers. So a school district is being completely controlled by an ethnic group that has no interest in the schools. Now, when Hillary Clinton was running for president, she went to visit that district and she kowtowed to all these people because she needed their vote to get elected. Just like in Brooklyn, where they have these schools, the yeshivas, where the kids don't learn how to read and write. But the state of New York is loath to say, listen, we're going to defund you. You're gonna cannot educate children if you don't give them certain standards. But they vote as a block. So here's the downside of democracy. When you get one issue voters that have enough power, they will swing the state legislature or the city legislature or the federal legislature to bend to their will. This is the downside of a virulent minority in a democracy that vote with one issue, whether it be guns, abortion, whatever it may be. Those issues will swing the election, so action never takes place that is really equitable for the population.
Indeed, and we have an election coming up in 9 days, guys.
It's happening right now, actually, right? Just about everywhere.
It's 40 million people so far have voted. 40 million people, that's a lot of people. That's roughly what help me with
1 in 9.
5% of the U.S. population, right?
About 20% of the voting, 25% of the voters have already voted.
20% of the voters have already voted, which is pretty sizable. So we are winding down on our hour. Does anybody want to have some parting words here?
No, but perhaps on the next podcast, and Ken, we'd love to have you back. We'll talk about the psychology of what's going on out there. And the work that I do, I see lots and lots of anxiety. I think it's showing up in many different forms. I think we're an anxious society right now, and that's a subject unto itself. But yeah, crazy times. That should be the name of the show, I think, from going forward. Crazy times. So
if I may say, I appreciate every one of you. Thank you for letting me on. It was a stimulating and intellectual conversation, and I appreciate that you let me be part of it. It was nice to be part of it.
Oh, it's wonderful. We want you back, Ken. Yeah, absolutely. So Ardina, you want to sign off? You signed us in, so you can sign us out.
I mean, I think it's just been this entire discussion has been great, and I'm so happy to work with Ken again. We worked together for a number of years, and I got to tell you, never had a bad day with that guy.
Same here.
Wonderful, wonderful man. So Ken, you are the door is always open to you. So you're going to be back on. We've got 9 days to go. We may be revisiting this discussion in a very different way come November 6th. But let's hope for the best. We're all Americans and we got to make it work. All right. So on that note, Bob is at the controls, so he has the power to close us out.
The Wizard of Oz right here. Yes, Vic.
I wanted to say, Bob, a friend called me up yesterday and it says, I'm taking anti-anxiety drugs because of this election. I can't sleep at nights. I've never heard that conversation in my life about an election. So on that note, Bob, let's hope that we all have a collective nervous breakdown on November 6th, okay?
Amen.
All right.
All the best, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, Ken.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Oh, yeah.